Hey everybody, Ted Forbes here, Art of Photography. Welcome to the show. Doing something a little bit different this week. First off, it's Shark Week, so happy Shark Week. I hope you're enjoying your Shark Week. And it's also, if you watch AMC on cable, it's actually Mob Movie Week, so both have a lot in common and absolutely nothing to do with the show. But as you can see, it's a rather informal environment here. And I've had this idea in mind recently that I want to try some different things, and we're going to try this today. I'm not going to put this in the, if you watch my podcast, we have distribution in iTunes, Vimeo, YouTube, and I think this might work best to just put these in YouTube, and I won't put them in the iTunes feed. But I've kind of wanted a vehicle where I could kind of talk and expand on some things. Maybe we could answer viewer questions, stuff like that. They're very informal, very easy to film. There's not a lot of production that goes into these. I'm just going to, put my little Kodak camera up and just shoot them. And we'll see how this goes. It may or may not be useful. If it's not, we'll discontinue. If it is, then maybe it can turn into a cool thing. But interestingly enough, after I recorded the last episode, which was episode 71, it was on sharper image myths, and I finished recording the episode. If you've seen it, and my first reaction was, well, I didn't have any images to show it, any examples. That probably just chalk it up. It wasn't a great piece, whatever. But what's interesting is it's one of those episodes that I kind of can't get out of my head, because I think it was kind of the philosophical nature of it, and talking about something that I always preach, that in photography, equipment it's important, but I think people obsess about it too much, and how to get away from that and start getting at the core of what you're about as an artist and what you're about as a photographer, that kind of thing. I have a very good friend, my buddy Jeff, so shout out to Jeff, and I did not know that Jeff watched my show regularly, and he watched the last episode, and we went to get coffee one day, and we had a discussion about it. And Jeff is not a photographer. Jeff is a visual artist, does absolutely amazing, stunning work. I'm a big fan of his. He's a big influence on me, and we were talking about it, and he said, well, it's interesting that in that episode you addressed that, rather than think, what is the next big expensive thing I can buy, turning that around and working with the limitations of, this is what I talked about in the episode, talking about the limitations of what you've got in front of you and what you have to work with is really important. And he mentioned something I did mention in the show that I thought was a great point. I wanted to share this, is that, not just that, but the limitations of what you have, becoming excited about that again, becoming excited about using your own equipment and working within those limitations. And it can be something cheap, like, we've talked a lot about Holgas lately. We've got the Holga projects going this summer. Actually, we've extended those, so they're going to be going for a while. And the Holga is a $30 camera. You stick some film in it. There's no options. You have one shutter speed and really one or two apertures at best. And learning how to work within those limitations can end up forcing creativity and end up forcing you to look at things different and view your work differently. And if you've been following me on Twitter or anything like that, this week I've done a lot of really blurry images, and it's no big secret that I'm a giant Karoshi Sugimoto fan. I'll actually pronounce it correctly in this episode. Anyway, I just love his work, and he does these wonderful, if you've seen them, these go look them up on Google. If you haven't, I'll put a link to under the video. But these wonderful architectural photos that he's done that are out of focus, and he has this whole concept of double infinity and this and that I won't get into. But more importantly, from a conceptual standpoint, he was saying, well, architecture comes from a human being, an architect, and that architect, has this vision in mind of what they want the building to look like. It's not a reality; it's just a vision. So there's all these missing parts. It's not clear. And so that's why he takes these out of focus to represent back to the architect's original vision from that standpoint. And I haven't been doing these with anything deep in mind like that. But one of the things I wanted to do after I filmed that episode, I thought, I'm not shooting enough. I'm not shooting as much as I'd like, especially on a personal work level. I do work, and it's easy to do that, fall into doing podcasts and leaving it at that. And so I'll show you one of the cameras I've been working with this week, which is a very inexpensive. You find them on eBay, and sometimes they kind of go through times where they get trendy, and they probably are overpriced for what they are. This is a great wall, and I've always liked this camera because this is a DF4. If you know anything about these, neither here nor there. It's basically a Holga with a few more options on it. It has a detachable lens that is rumored to actually be an larger lens. It's made by a company in China. It takes 120 medium format film. It's got this 90mm lens on it. The aperture's manual. It's basically like a Holga with some apertures, a glass lens with a few elements in it, and a choice of 4 shutter speeds and a bulb setting. So again, you have more options than you do on a Holga, but it's still very limiting as far as that goes. And I've always kind of had a fondness for this camera. remember seeing Gala trail shooting on one years ago, and I thought, wow, I really got interested. And then when I got it, it was just amazing to me what, first of all, just a piece of junk it is, and I mean that's in terms of endearment, but how wonderful that kind of becomes, because you're not afraid to take it out, you're not afraid if you're going to lose it or something like that, and you tend to throw it around and abuse it more than you would something that costs a lot of money. One of the first things I remember doing on this camera was the trick where a lot of these cheaper or older lenses will only focus, I think this is 1 meter, is as close as you get. Yeah, it's 1 meter. It's the closest focal distance you can get, so you can't do macro with it without using filters or something like that. But here's an old trick for you. If you take the lens off, so in order to do this, you're going to need a camera that will still take a picture without a lens on it. So this could be a digital camera, and you need a detachable lens. You flip it around, so this is on frontwards, I've unscrewed it. You turn it around backwards, pop it back on. You're going to have to kind of play with distance and stuff, but then it becomes a macro lens, which is really cool. You can do really close focusing. Another somewhat interesting effect from that is you give an extremely shallow depth of field when you do that. Just the way the optics work, it comes down to like a millimeter or two at that point, so you have to be very careful what you're focusing on. I've used it for that in the past, and what got me thinking about this week was, looking back at Sugimoto's work, is detaching the lens and just unscrewing to the point where I kind of hold it with my hands. This is really technically a really bad move here, but you can actually do kind of some tilt shift effects just by moving the lens around. You're also going to let light in at some point and probably fog your image a little bit, but even if you pull it that way, and even just the unscrewing it a couple times, you've moved this past the infinity mark. And what's interesting is just throwing your camera out of focus. Something is in focus in the shot, and I wanted to take some photos more in the style of what Sugimoto was doing, which are completely out of focus. And doing this gives me that look, and sometimes there's some adjustment involved, and sometimes getting a black cloth or something just to make sure you're not dealing with light leaks and stuff. And people think you're really weird when you're kind of like manually holding a lens and trying to take a picture out in public. But I think what it's done for me is, like, this is what I would classify as an experiment, okay? And I would encourage everybody who aspires to be a photographer and aspires to get better at what they're doing to do the same. And just come up with an experimental idea. And my whole thing was doing stuff out of focus, right? And so I'm going to explore that. And so I went through a couple rolls of film. You could do this on digital camera. You could figure a different concept. You could do, I want to capture a certain color or something. And you go after it. And here's the deal with experiments, is it's not work that needs to be released to the public. Now, I put a lot of stuff on Flickr and Twitter this week. And I put the better images up. There's a lot of stuff that you won't see. And making yourself okay with that I'm going to do this, and if I get the roll of film back or the CF card out and everything on here sucks, it's okay. I can live with it because I experimented. Because you know what's going to happen is tomorrow you're going to go out and shoot, and you're going to get a little bit better. And the next day you're going to go out and shoot, and you're going to get a little bit better than that. And this whole thing builds upon itself. And that's really the most important takeaway here, is just, trying to figure out a starting place, something you haven't done before, something that's different. And in my case, it was these blurry photos. And what I've learned from this so far, after about 3 or 4 rolls of film this week, is that there is some compositional elements to this. Well, what you do when you take out any kind of sharpness to the photo, you're really reducing things down to compositional elements. So nothing is sharp, everything is blurred, it starts to smear, it starts to go out of focus, and the composition really speaks below all that. And that's what I'm going for on there, is just an exercise to try to get better at doing that. Now, these are not things that I would probably print or put in and use as gallery work or try to sell them as images, things like that. But what I'm doing is I'm going to draw on this experience in the future with other images. And maybe they're not completely out of focus, but there's something I can take away from this. And that's all I wanted to talk about today, was just, finding a piece of equipment, finding out what the limitations are, maybe exploiting them somewhat to a degree, and trying to learn from that experience. And, like my buddy Jeff said, what's interesting about it is when you can get out of your mind, I'm going to surf the B&H website today and price out some lenses, and at what point in the future will I be able to afford them? I mean, come on, I've done it, everybody's done it. But go with something that's cheap, that's available, that you have, and take pictures. That is the most important thing you can do. And I said this in the last podcast, and I won't repeat myself on here, but like what Jeff was saying, is you become strangely enchanted with the equipment that you have. And this is a camera that I probably would never sell, and I'd probably be pretty bummed if something ever happened to it. It has become valuable to me in that sense, because I can get a look and I can get things on here that I can't get on my expensive cameras or my Canon or things like that. And that's really more fun to me anyway. and I think it becomes more valuable to you. So anyway, we'll try these from time to time. You'll see what we can do on here. When I started distributing the podcast on YouTube, I noticed that people tend to want more stuff, and I put those out. I try to do them once a week, and sometimes it stretches. And so we'll see what we can do with that, and maybe do some more things on here. So this has sort of been the art of photography. I don't know what we're going to call these, art of photography extra or something like that. So anyway, that's it for today, and we'll catch you next time.